I'm getting ready to attempt to do the shadows. And what I have done is I put in some very light lines when I first transferred it. And I've lost most of those lines. So what I've taken is my 10% cool gray. I can barely see it. So if you have a 20% cool gray, I would recommend it. And very lightly tried to figure out from this black and white picture where my shadows are. So obviously no color, but it is a good reference as to how dark it gets in here. Most of these are in color as the light is coming through the leaf, the translucent leaf. And on this one, I've lost the shadows up here, but when I look at this, I can see a little bit of shadows here, very dark shadow here. And then these are all really beautiful, translucent all the way out to here. And I'm just going to futz around with it. I'm going to use the colors I've already got plus some grays, some very light cool grays. So let's go. So before I get started, I'm going to make a little correction. I want to make sure that I get in this yellow line here before I go in and do this. So let's get that. I'm using the Deco Yellow to get that little line in on the edge of the leaf. And then I'm going to go in with my olive green and just get a few layers in of, I can't remember if I used the moss green or not in this area, but it's a really narrow yellow area, so I use this green to butt up against it. Got a little misshaped there, so I corrected that. So just getting in that shape, narrowing. Oop, don't know what that was. I think I'm using a combination of the olive green and the moss green. I am trying to make that yellow line a little narrower. So this is a dark shadow under the leaf. It's almost the same color as the leaf. And it's pretty soft edged, so I want to make sure that it's not a real hard edge, like I was just pointing at the edge of the leaf is pretty hard. So it's a little yellowish. I get my white out to fuzz it up a little bit, make it fuzzy on the edge so that it looks more like a shadow. This is the 20% cool gray, and I'm going to be using it very lightly to work on this little shadow at the end here. Making sure I've got a little bit of a yellow edge there too. So you can barely see what I'm doing. I end up going back much later and making another little light layer on top of it just so you could see it, but I know you can barely see it. So that's pretty much that. I get out my kneadable eraser and just use it to soften the edges and get out any areas that I don't think I went into any areas I didn't like. So I think I'm pretty okay with that. And this is the 10% cool gray. So I'm just blending out the grayness with just another layer, a lighter gray. So I go over this little shadow one more time with white to blend it out further, smooth it out, but also to soften up the edges. Make sure they're nice and soft. And then I'm going to move on to that long shadow under the stem. And there's a lot of different colors in that. So I try to figure out what the color is at the base of the stem right there, but it doesn't work because it's too small a space. So this is I believe it's Deco Peach. I just see a little bit of a peachy color here. It's coming through that yellow part, the bottom of the stem. There's a little area right there at the base of it. And then I'm just going to kind of carefully use those long strokes to get to the end. It's pretty straight. I think I bent mine a little bit more than it is actually bent. This is I think a 30% cool gray. This shadow is darker at both ends and lighter in the middle. I'm trying to smooth it out with the white a little bit. And then coming back in with the darker gray there. I think that was still, oh, now I'm pointing at the other area where I see a whole bunch of different colors. So there's some yellow at the edge of the leaf that I want to make sure that I get in. And then there's some green right there. So this is the moss green that I'm putting in the actual stem. Then there's some green shadowy stuff around it. So that's the cool gray that I'm using around it. I think that's the olive green that I'm using around it and in the stem a bit. And here's that Deco light peach again. And then I'm going to try to smooth the whole thing out with the white. So I don't really have a plan for this. It is very much trial and error, this shadow. I've never done a shadow quite like this with these translucent, these colors coming through the leaf. So I'm starting out with the same colors that I used in the leaf. That was the apple green, very light layer. This is the sunburst yellow. Again, I'm trying to go very lightly here. And I'm just referring to the reference photo and trying to get it down where I see it. Back to the apple green. I'm not going to cut out much here, so this will end up being a pretty long video because I switch color. There's so many different colors along this, and I go back and forth between colors. This is the olive green. It's darker right next to the bottom of the leaf right there. That's what pushes the leaf up to our eyes when you get that darkness in there, because that's where the shadow really is. And then pulling out the color as it moves away, as the shadow moves away from the leaf. This is poppy red, and that's the sunburst yellow. So I end up using a combination of the sunburst yellow and very, very light poppy red to create this reddish color that's coming through the leaf. Right there, poppy red, very light. And the thing that really helps that I'm not doing quite yet, but you're going to see soon, is I go back and forth going over them several times with a white that smooths it out, lightens it up, and gives it more of that pastel-y and translucent look. So that was the sunburst yellow and the poppy red, and back to the apple green. They all kind of overflow onto each other a bit. So moving along, more sunburst yellow, apple green, it's almost like a little puzzle. That's the moss green, I believe. So darkening up a little bit. This is pumpkin orange. We're starting into the part of the shadow that's quite a bit darker, and I see it as having an orangey, brownish, greenish. There's all these different colors that blend together to make it into a pretty neutral color. So you'll see me adding a lot of crazy colors here. It's lighter on the edge, so I move to the mineral orange. This is the yellow ochre. Back to the apple green, and then I think I'm gonna, nope, thought I was gonna move the yellow ochre over on, the apple green over onto it. So a little more mineral orange. Blending the colors together. This is where I go ahead and I am adding enough pressure, just enough pressure to get it to start to blend together. So it's not a real light pressure. I'd say it's probably a 2 to 3. And I want to see the colors start to blend out a bit. And I actually have the white beyond where the colors are because I'm going to be pulling more of the color on top of the white as we go along. Like that. So I just see it as it fades, it just fades out as it moves away from the leaf. Back to the white. A little bit of poppy red. Blend it out with the white. At this point, I want to get a little bit of gray in here. I don't know that it's absolutely necessary, but this is a warm gray, 20%. I'm just doing a very light layer over the top of the whole thing here. And I go back and add a little more yellow and a little more poppy red, just to see if I can get it to be a little more consistent with the reference photo. A little more apple green. So you can see how much fussing around I'm doing with this. Had the yellow, now back to the poppy red. More yellow as we move down. So I almost approach this in two parts. I do this, the colors to the left that are brighter, and then eventually really work on, now I'm starting to work on the darkening colors over here. So this is olive green, and I'm trying to get, I just see a lot of green in this, this part of the shadow, the dark part of the shadow. This is, I decided to get the dark line. It's really dark right next to the leaf. So this is Tuscan red. So I'm trying to build in a little bit of a darkness as I go along, right along there, because it is pretty dark. It's hard for me to tell if it's the darkness of a shadow or if it's a vein there. I'm really not quite sure. It reads both ways. I think you could use many different combinations of colors in this shadow right here, because there's a little bit of everything in it. It's a little bit reddish, it's a little bit brownish, it's a little bit greenish, and that's why it comes off as neutral. And it looks like I'm about to go off screen. I hope I don't do too much of that. On the very edge of it, I see it more of a goldenrod ochre color. So I am moving it so you can see it. You did not miss much. So I am going into this dark area with this olive green because I do see a lot of green in it. I'm trying not to be too heavy-handed, though I probably could have been a little heavier-handed because I end up doing so much layering here. At the very end, there's just that little bit that is light, that it looks like the leaf is lifting off the table, and I want to get that effect in there. So jumping back to the apple green. And then getting the apple green, a little of the apple green in that dark area. And back to the Tuscan red in the dark area. That was still the Tuscan red, and this is the goldenrod, trying to get a little bit of a golden fade out away from the shadow. This is the olive green. Just a light layer in there also, and this is the light peach that I just see. I don't know why that color is in there, but I see it as a color on the very edge of the colored part of the shadow and sticking out a little bit at the very end right there. It's hard to tell on the video, but that's that color. This is it's one of the warm grays. Oh, I'm getting that really dark. This is olive green in right under. So trying to get those darkest colors right next to the leaf, because that's what really pushes it up. And then this is, I do believe this is about 20% warm gray, going over it again and pulling it out, especially on the edges. Then this is the olive green again. I'm really avoiding the dark green because of how blue it was. So I think you could use the moss green here. You could use the olive green here. I'm using more pressure. I'm really trying to darken it up because it is still not nearly dark enough. Tuscan red. It lightens up a little bit right about there again, and then goes dark. This is the goldenrod. So I'm going over everything with a little bit of goldenrod, getting a little bit more of uniformity of color. There's the gray again. It's using the gray on the very end there, and I'm pulling it out away from the leaf. Then I go over the whole thing with white. And I like the way it softens it, but it also lightens it. As I'm looking at this, I'm going to see. What I'm noticing is I need to soften, so this kind of goes light here, and there's this roundedness to some of the colors, and I've got a flatness across it. And I can't tell if you can tell, but this is still quite a bit darker than this. I'm going to try to go for that. Not sure if I'm that, I guess I'm going to work on this shadow out here a little bit more. And I think that's what I'm going to do for now. So before I get going, I decide to pull some color out to try to get that little roundedness effect I was just talking about. I don't know that I succeed at getting that much color out. And then I go back in with the white. I basically put a layer of white down under where I'm going to be pulling colors out. And I started with the apple green, now I've got the deco yellow, and you can see I'm moving out pretty far away from where I've been. And I am just going to futzing around with colors all over again. This is the poppy red, apple green, poppy red, olive green, that is the Tuscan red, I believe. So this is the stage where I think I'm really trying to darken it up and pull more of the color out away from the leaf. That's the goldenrod. This is the 20% warm gray, so I'm using that gray over the white that I had already put that in. What I'm noticing is what I'm liking so far of what I'm seeing is how soft it looks. And that's important in this particular shadow. There's very few hard lines. So I'm using this gray to go out and get that shadow. This is the Tuscan red. I think what I was using before was the dark brown. I think either would work. Just trying to darken it up a bit more. This is, I'm actually up into the leaf now because the bottom of the leaf, right before it folds up away from the shadow, is a little bit darker. So I wanted to make sure I got that in there. This is the 20% warm gray that I'm using just to move on out away from the leaf. And this is that peach, light peach. So just getting a couple of light layers, moving away. I'm not sure this particular shadow is necessary, but I decided to put it in. I also decided to go back and darken up the shadow I did earlier. And then move on down where I see it on down, pulling out away from the shadow that I already made. So I finish up that area. You can see I'm getting a pretty light layer on. I go over it with white to just blend it out. Really I can't see it in the video recording I'm making, so I'm not sure if you can see it or not. So just finishing that up, and I am going to call this video done.